Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final session of day one here at ETE 2022. I'm Matt Swartley with Chariot Solutions, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to Linda Rising, who is a speaker, author, and independent consultant located near Nashville, Tennessee. She's the author of numerous articles and 5 books, and she was recently honored by the World Agility Forum with their Lifetime Achievement Award. Linda often speaks and writes about the topic of agile, and today she is going to share with us what she has learned recently about trees and the secret of agility. So please welcome Linda Rising.
Thank you, Matt. It's wonderful to be here. Although it's a beautiful day in Nashville, it's high 50s and brilliant sun. So if you're interested in starting traveling, come on down to Nashville and we'll walk up and down Broadway. This first slide has some important information. I hope to have time for questions at the end, but if we don't get there for you or you don't think of your question until tomorrow, well, please go ahead, send me some email and I'm happy to talk about agile or trees or how you think. So just use my email address, linda@lindarising.org. If you think the presentation was worthwhile, I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint so you can translate it to another language or share it with your team or your family, talk about trees, talk about agility. Let's connect on LinkedIn. So I hope to hear from you, maybe tomorrow. You know, you can tell already, I am incredibly old. In fact, I just had a big birthday on March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day. One of the best birthday gifts I ever got was that birthday. On St. Patrick's Day this year, I turned 80. And I always get this question, well, Linda, oh my God, you're incredibly old. What keeps you going? And of course, the real answer to that is, I have no idea. But if I were to guess, I would say it has something to do with exercise. I have always believed in the importance of exercise. I make time for exercise every day. And for me, until the pandemic, that meant going to the gym. That meant using the stepper, lifting some weights, using the equipment at the gym. And unfortunately, we all know what happened. When the pandemic hit, we weren't able to go to the gym anymore. The gyms were closed. Now, exercise is important, I know. Couldn't go to the gym. What should we do? Well, I live in a wonderful retirement community just outside Nashville, Tennessee. My husband and I moved here 11 years ago, and we did so because of the enormous, huge list of amenities. This place is awesome. And one of the amenities is miles and miles and miles of walking trails. We knew that. We had looked at some of the trails when we came here to visit, but we'd never really tried them. We'd never really walked on them. We'd never really experimented with them. We thought they were a nice thing to have, but exercise for me, even though I talk about the importance of walking and getting outside, for me, walking outside was, well, like a secondary, a nice to have, but it's not real exercise. I was, well, let's face it, I was an exercise snob. One of the things I've learned about myself over this pandemic, I discounted one of the best forms of exercise ever. And I was only forced to see it when the pandemic closed the gyms. So my husband started out and we realized we could walk for over 4 miles every day just by taking advantage of this wonderful amenity. We could be outside enjoying nature, of course, but also even in the cold weather. Yes, Tennessee has winter. It's not severe. It doesn't last very long, but even in the winter, we could get outside and enjoy our exercise. And lots of animals also joined us. Deer, lots and lots of deer, of course, and lots of rabbits, of course. But we also have a family of foxes. This is a vixen. She had 3 little kits, and we got to enjoy seeing them play and romp around with each other. There are lots of birds, of course, but we have some pretty big ones. We have owls, we have hawks. We also have wild turkey, but I was unable to get a good picture of them. They are really nervous and they move fast, and wasn't always prepared when I did see them. And you don't often see them because they are just a little bit leery of people. But yeah, we had wild turkey as well. But of course, the big thing, and it's the topic of this talk, of course, there were trees. Now, I'm not a botanist. I'm a computer scientist, former mathematician, and I've always been interested in science, but I wouldn't call myself an expert on plants of any kind. But as we spent time out there with the animals and the trees, I realized I don't really know much about them. As you look at a tree, you somehow don't think of agility. You think a tree has no choice about how it's going to respond to the environment, how change happens, how learning or collaboration, those things just don't seem to be associated with a tree. A tree is nice, of course. We like trees. We like walking around. We like being with trees. But I knew nothing. So I thought maybe I should do some research. You know, I love to give weird talks, and I don't mind heading off in strange directions because I know that I'm likely going to find out something interesting that will help me, well, learn about myself, learn about the world, learn about agility. So I began to investigate. I wanted to learn a little more about trees. And I discovered that all plants, not just trees, but all plants have roots. Of course, I knew that, even I knew that, but that the roots of all these plants extended with the benefit or the help of a particular kind of fungus. Now, a fungus is not a plant, it's not an animal, it's its own little category. So I learned that as well. But this particular kind of fungus is called a mycorrhizal fungus. And if you look at the roots of any tree or plant, whether it's in a pot in your home or whether it's outside growing wild, the roots of all those plants will be extended by these little tiny, well, they look like little tubes. They seem to be hollow, and they're white and yellow in color. And they extend the roots of the plant to which they are attached. Now, this seems really strange, doesn't it? Why? Why would the fungus choose to hang around the roots of a plant? The answer was unwreathed by a research of a wonderful young, at the time, forester named Suzanne Simard. She did her research showing how that fungus connects all of the plants that grow in the forest. That is, all the trees have roots. All the roots of the trees are connected to the fungus. The fungus extends out across the floor of the forest until it runs into the next tree and the next and the next. There are miles and miles and miles of underground connections that link all the plants in the forest, in particular the trees. And she was able to show this scientifically using radioactive carbon to show that the carbon that the trees import through photosynthesis will travel through this enormous network and wind up in the roots of, and therefore in the plant of, some neighboring tree or other plant. They were all connected. And not only are they all connected, but I don't want to be too anthropomorphic here, but they talk to one another. They communicate. They share information. And they help each other. If one plant is in trouble, other trees around it will support it by sending it what it needs. So Suzanne Simard had her article published in Nature, which is a top-rate #1. I mean, if you were going to go for a publication that made a difference, it would be Nature. And it was the featured article in 1997. And the editor of the magazine said, "You're talking about something that's a little bit like the internet, only it's underground." And he called it the Wood Wide Web. Now, everyone was not super excited about this. They thought this was a little too much. Yes, she had science on her side. She had research, but her conclusions seemed a little too remote. And of course, here she is, a woman in a male-dominated field, forestry. She's trying to show the implications of this communication. To me, when I read the article, and by the way, if you can't find it, I'll be happy to send it to you. To me, this meant the trees are agile. They share, they collaborate, they learn from each other. They know who their neighbors are. And even those who are dying, they will help a neighbor in need. Then I found her book, which just came out in 21. It's called Finding the Mother Tree. So if you're casting about for an interesting book to read, I know you have so many books to read. I'm surrounded by books I have to read, but I want this one to go at the top of your list. It's easy to read. It's not only going to tell you a lot about trees, it's going to be a little bit of the sharing of the journey that Suzanne took herself and what she learned about herself along the way, about forestry, about trees, about the environment, and the projects she continues to be interested in. So please run out and buy this one, or if you want to get it on an audiobook, that's okay too. It's such a good story. So she, in her research, has discovered not only this connection, not only is this mycorrhizal fungus connecting all of the trees in the forest, what she was able to show is how things travel, how things move around, how it is that the trees that seem to be static, rooted in place with no control over their environment, how they are able to make change, adapt, learn, share, communicate as a result of this extensive mycorrhizal underground connection. So let's just get a little bit technical, just a little bit. A plant takes in, because it has green leaves, it takes in carbon dioxide from the air, and it extracts the carbon, and it uses that carbon to make, well, we could call it a carbohydrate, a kind of sugar, and it uses that carbohydrate to structure itself. But that's not enough. If plants only had the carbon as a result of photosynthesis, it would not be enough for survival. The plants also need, and the list is pretty extensive, they need a lot of minerals. And the only way they could obtain these minerals is by having some help. And that's what the fungus provides. The fungus grows underground, so it has no way of extracting CO2 from the air. It can't do photosynthesis. So it's also in trouble. It needs the carbon that the plants provide, and it has access to all the minerals underground. Not only that, the fungus, by its structure, is better able to carry those minerals. The roots of plants are not adapted to carry the minerals they need. So the fungus attaches itself to the roots and makes a little, well, you could call it like a little gateway or a doorway to say, I will help you. I will give you the minerals you need through this little gateway, and now you will give to me what I need, which is carbon. I don't know about you, but when I read about that, I thought, this is evolution at its best. That somehow these two beings evolved to support each other. The fungus could stay underground. The plants could reach up to the atmosphere and the sunlight. And together, they could enable survival of the other organisms. But it's more complicated than that, because it sometimes moves only one way and sometimes the other way. They communicate. They tell each other what they need. They send little messages back and forth. I need some more nitrogen. Okay, fine, here you go. The fungus will say, I'm really hurting for sugar now. Can you send me some? Yes, okay, I'll be happy to do that. They communicate their needs. And if they're sick and they need a little more attention, they have but to ask, and they receive it from their neighbors. So Suzanne's research not only showed that, yes, carbon does flow from the plants across the mycorrhizal network to other plants, but that the plants communicate with the fungus and the fungus with the plants. So they all are hooked together. It's an enormous, complex, adaptive system. And I realized in reading this, I had no idea. I didn't know anything about trees, about agility, because the trees have been doing this longer than we have. trees not only live longer, but their evolutionary history is longer. So they understand the true essence of agility. They'll even tell each other when there's danger. So these are acacia trees, and the giraffes love to eat them. And as soon as they start eating on one acacia tree, that tree will warn the others in the neighborhood, saying, uh-oh, trouble here. Now, the trees do have a protective response. They can produce a bitter, not poisonous, but toxic chemical that the giraffes don't like, and it will cause them to move on and find something else. So when one acacia tree is in trouble, it can warn the others so they can begin producing that, well, bitter compound, so that giraffes now know that. They know that if they begin tasting this bitter compound, they better move several feet away, because all the other trees in the neighborhood are also, even though nobody has been eating them, are also producing this, because they have communicated with each other and they have said, get ready. Here come the giraffes. They do this for each other. The trees help one another. I'm not going to say they're altruistic, because evolution has provided a reason. If we help each other, then our community will be better, our community will be stronger, our community will be more likely to survive. So right now, we know the planet is in trouble, and our best hope is to learn from the trees how we can do a better job of helping each other, and to allow the trees to help us. This is not a talk about saving the trees to save the trees. This is a talk about saving the trees so the trees can help us. So I'm going to share some research, some scientific studies that show the benefit of having trees in our lives. Not just because it's a nice to have, and oh yeah, it makes that walk so enjoyable to get out there every day, even in the cold, and be with the animals and the trees. Of course, intuitively, we feel that is a good thing. But now the science shows real, measurable, concrete, objective benefits. So the earliest study that I could find has to do with patients in a hospital who'd had some kind of surgery. And they arranged randomly to put these surgical patients in one of two groups. One group was put into a hospital room after the surgery that had a window that looked out on some trees. Now, it wasn't a lavish park. The hospital patients, of course, could not go outside. They were recovering from surgery, but they could look outside. That's all they did, was just look at the trees. The other group, remember, this is random assignment. The other group also had a window, but the window looked out on a brick wall. So you can probably guess this would have had an impact. I mean, I haven't had any surgery lately, but if I had, I know where I would rather be. I know I'd probably feel better. I'd be happier. I don't know what the real benefits would be, but I'm guessing they would be considerable. And that's true. They measured how much those patients took in the way of painkillers. Most of the time in the hospital, if you need more, they will give it to you. Is this particular medication strong enough, or do we need to double down on the dose? So they found that those who were in the rooms with the windows looking at the trees didn't need as much pain medicine. And the medicine they needed could be a little weaker. They also weren't as anxious. There are also drugs for anxiety that surgical patients take. Those who could see the trees didn't need as much of the anxiety medication. Those who could see trees also had other benefits. They didn't have as many other side effects, headaches, nausea. Well, some of these things maybe we don't want to talk about, but they didn't have as many other problems. And overall, the tree patients, they didn't take as long to recover from the same surgery. So when I read this paper, I thought, if this can happen for people in a hospital, for people who have had surgery, well, what about the rest of us who are healthy? What about the rest of us who haven't had surgery? What are the benefits for us in just even seeing a tree? And wondering now, in this time of pandemic, when a lot of people are on lockdown still, what are you staring at all day? Is it the equivalent of a brick wall? Do you take time? Do you make the effort to even look out? Do you have a window? Even better, can you go outside? Can you be out there with the trees? The trees can help you. We know they can help sick people. So you, a healthy person, you're also going to benefit. We're just not letting the trees do what they can for us. We're not taking advantage of that. This was an interesting field study. And by field study, I mean, they didn't have to manipulate or assign people to a random group. This is a story of a horrible, horrible situation in Chicago. These are high-rise homes for low-income people. In the beginning, when the high-rise buildings were first erected, there were trees. Not a lot of trees, but there were some trees and some green space, a little bit of grass. But over time, a certain subset of these buildings, well, maybe the managers thought, it's too much trouble taking care of the grass, and the kids go out and play, and then it gets muddy. No, let's just get rid of it. Let's just pave it over. Let's make it all asphalt and concrete. And so they did. So some of these buildings have absolutely no green space around them. Others still have not a lot, but a little, a couple of trees, a little bit of grass. So they observed, what's the behavior like of people who live in these two different environments? Because otherwise the people would be the same, the living conditions would be pretty much the same. The only difference would be some have a few trees, a little bit of grass, and others, well, they wouldn't have any. Would there be measurable differences? And what they found was, yes, considerable differences in how people interacted with each other, in the trust they had with their neighbors, in whether or not the children got along with each other, were able to go play. And then they looked at Chicago police crime records, and they found that in those buildings with even just a couple of trees were safer. They had less incidents of violence. People felt better felt safer. So just a few trees, just a little bit of green grass, what a difference it made in the lives of those families, especially for the children. The children have suffered through this pandemic. And one of the ways is not being able to play outside with other children. So it's called attention restoration theory. We don't do well. The psychologists measure this. We don't do well if we have no access to the natural world. We get physically, mentally, spiritually worn out. Our decision-making process is not as good. It's been measured that we are so much better when we have a chance just for a small exposure to nature. And even more so now, during the pandemic, when many people have spent so much time inside. And we can see the incidences of depression and mental fatigue clearly on the rise. We know that just spending a little bit of time in nature, your creativity goes up by as much as 15%. Our mood improves, depression goes down, our ability to memorize goes up, stress goes down. We measure those stress hormones, heart rate decreases, blood pressure goes down. We have lived with trees throughout our long history. And we know that just being around green things makes us better. It makes us feel better, makes our behavior better. One of the researchers on this area is a young woman at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And in her research, she has found enormous benefits for trees. And what I like about it is that she says in the beginning, she was not a believer. She was doing it for a whole host of reasons, mostly that her advisor was interested in this research. So she did it. She signed up for it. But she didn't really expect to find the enormous benefits that she did. This is her statement. Before we started our research, I would have said, well, trees are nice. But the problems we're facing in our cities and budgets are such, I'm not sure they're worth it. But now in our research, I have become convinced that trees are an important part of a supportive, humane environment. And without it, we are very different. After she spent a year in her study, she decided that she needed to walk outside and look up at the canopy of trees above her office. So she started her daily tree walk just based on what she had seen in that short period of time. The benefits are enormous. I know not everybody can have miles and miles and miles and miles of trails with animals, but even a little city park, just a tiny space. We saw what a difference it made in those Chicago housing complexes. It can be the same for you. Even if you live in a very busy urban area and you only have a little spot where there are a few trees, getting out there, and especially with your children, reduces depression, high blood pressure, stress, anxiety. It improves the development of children just going once a week. Just getting out once a week to talk to the trees. even if you don't spend very much time. This is a study done in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Even in the cold weather, people do better if they have a chance to walk in nature compared to just walking the streets of an urban area where there is no green. Those people that just have a chance to spend a short amount of time walking with trees and grass see measurable improvements in their ability. So it doesn't take much. You don't have to walk 4 miles a day. You just need to get out for a few minutes every day, once a week, see the benefits. Of course, the stories are legend of all the tech giants that spent time in nature. Steve Jobs is famous for coming into someone's office and saying, "Hey, let's go for a walk." He meant, let's get outside. Let's walk around Palo Alto. He didn't say, let's choose a particular kind of tree, but that's what they did. So an urban environment, not miles and miles of walking trails, but there were trees and they were outside. Jeff Bezos went to Central Park. If you've ever been to New York City, you know that's a haven. There are lots of people who spend an enormous amount of time there enjoying the green space. LinkedIn's CEO started walking in Mountain View, California to help him think about which way he was going, what kind of decision he was going to make. I have a different talk about thinking and problem solving, but number one on the list is stop staring at that screen and get outside just for a few minutes. Just go for a walk. Look at the trees, look at the green. We're hardwired to look at the environment, to be around blue and green, and the studies show we do so much better. So we have so many good examples to follow. I'll be happy to send you this paper. They said nature is, it's like taking a special kind of morphine. It's like an opioid for the brain. Yes, okay, morphine is usually for people in pain, but it also reduces stress and it helps your thinking, your creativity, your problem solving. Now, one of the problems with Western science is that it takes things apart. It doesn't like to think about the holistic view, the big picture. It doesn't really deal well with complex adaptive systems. It likes to think that if we just take this apart and we look at the pieces and analyze them, then we'll somehow understand the whole. We like to break things apart. We even do that in software. Now that means we miss a lot of the messages that come from large organic systems, like the forest. We wouldn't have seen that in the early days without some understanding of, well, it's not just about, okay, trees do photosynthesis. Yeah, we got that. Okay, we know there's this fungus. Yeah, nobody would have thought that there was some kind of communication going and that the whole system that involved not just the trees, but all the plants in the forest and the fungus and what's going on in the air and what other animals are around and how does all that fit together. And we tend to do that for ourselves as well. We need to step back and say, well, how does this team or these organizations, it's like trees in a forest. We are like organisms, individuals working together. That's really the message of Agile, is to think about collaboration and learning and moving forward. Science is good. It's brought us a lot of advantages. But the promises were that somehow our lives would be better. And instead, we've taken some of that technology and we now cannot let it go. We must have that phone. We must have that technology device. We're not better because of that. We've become extensions of that technology. And along with that are measurable problems in how we think and how our children develop. It impacts our sleep, our overall IQ, our stress levels, our feelings of burnout and depression. This is an amazing statistic to me that every year American and Canadian customers buy more than 12 tons of anti-anxiety medication, 7 tons of sleeping pills, 150 tons of antidepressants. This last experiment is about drugs. In London, typically go to the people who live in an area, they go to their local pharmacy. So again, it's a field experiment. You don't have to assign people. They already live in a neighborhood. That neighborhood already has a certain amount of green space, parks, little areas where there are trees. They can also measure in those pharmacies how many people are taking what kinds of medication. And what they saw in this longitudinal study was that if there was not so much green space in a neighborhood, then the number of medications that people were taking for anti-anxiety and anti-depression went up. Correlation, green space, and taking drugs. So if you live in an area where you have access to green space, you are less likely to need certain kinds of medication. I don't know what else we need. That's pretty clear evidence, I think. So we need to learn some things from the trees. And the first one is, it's not about altruism, that we help each other because, well, it's the right thing to do. Maybe we're of a particular religious persuasion and we believe that. It's that we are all hooked together. If you go down, then that affects my environment. If you don't do well, that impacts me. That we have to help one another. Today, you might need help. You might be sick. Tomorrow, it might be me. So we need to support each other. That's what the trees do. The trees don't discriminate. They can tell the difference. A birch tree knows where the other young birch saplings are. They can identify that. They would prefer to help their own, but they will help anyone who needs it. So birch will help fir. Fir will help birch. Because they know a healthy community is the best thing for all of us. That's the big message from the trees. We're all in this together. It's not just about, okay, I'm connected to the trees around with me and I help them out and the birch helps the fir and the fir. It's yes, of course. But what Suzanne discovered in measuring the connections is that there are some trees, here they're the darker colors. The darker the color, the more connections. So there are isolated individuals in the forest that have more connections than other trees. And typically, those she calls mother trees, or We could call them father trees. They are the oldest, the most connected. They have the most knowledge. And yes, they do share information. Of course, they prefer their own species, but they will help anyone. And these old trees, even when they die, they do everything they can in their last months to help all of the young trees around them. So what happens when somebody decides to cut down a forest and build more houses? Well, they just indiscriminately cut down everything. It's called clear cutting. Not realizing that Suzanne Simard's research showed if you left behind a handful of those old trees, that when you planted new ones around the housing area, that these old trees would be able to help them, would be able to tell them, would be able to communicate with them, would be able to share information that would make them all healthier. So when I read that, I thought, wow, there are some trees that are really old. I did a little research, and this one is the oldest in the world. It's called Methuselah. How appropriate. It's a bristlecone pine. It lives in California, and it's 5,000 years old. Maybe one of the reasons why the trees are so wise is they live so much longer than we do. They've seen so much more than we can possibly see. Even in our short history, the trees have been around longer, and individuals have lived so much longer that wisdom, that accumulated knowledge is something we can only dream about. We can't hope to have seen as much. Even in my 80 years, I'm not even close to Methuselah. Our timelines, the human timeline is so different. Those trees, I learned so much. They're social. They can do so many amazing things. They can count. They can learn and pass along knowledge. They take care of each other. Someone needs help, they provide it. They send signals back and forth. And when especially revered trees die, sometimes they will even take care of what is left of that tree for decades. So I learned a lot. I talk about walking and all the benefits. I know that that's true, that you do better when you walk, you think better when you walk, you make better decisions, you come up with creative solutions, you solve problems, but I never really took it seriously. It took this pandemic to wake me up, to make me see the real benefits of walking. Now, I'm not only incredibly old, but I'm also incredibly healthy. I do not take any medication. I don't have any serious health problems, save for one. Before the pandemic, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis. That means my bones were deteriorating. And I said, how can this be? I watch my diet, I do my exercise, I lift weights. How can my bones be deteriorating? All the research shows I should be absolutely fine, but I was not. So finally, my internist said, now look, Linda, your numbers are really bad and getting worse. So we are going to put you on medication. Oh no, I said, no. But I also don't want to fall and break my hip and wind up. Oh, well, anyway, let's not go there. So I started on the medication. Now, the medication won't make your bones better. It will keep your bones from getting worse. And then the pandemic hit. And in my walking, I kept thinking, oh no, this is going to be bad. I'm not lifting weights. I'm not really doing all that serious exercise. This is just walking. And when I went in for my checkup, my annual visit to my doctor, she did a bone density test and she said, Linda, what's going on here? Your bone density is increasing. I couldn't believe it. I thought, how can that be? I said, well, maybe it's the medication. She said, no, the medication would not make your bone density better. It would just keep it from getting worse. She said, whatever you're doing, keep it up. That's when I realized the trees were helping me. Getting outside was helping me. Doing the walking was helping me. She said, I don't think you need to take this medication anymore. Thanks to the trees. I read Suzanne Simard's research and I thought, I think that's me. I think I'm a mother tree. I think I have lots and lots of connections. And I feel like that's my job now, is to help all the young trees, the younger ones who need the help. That's it. I'm a mother tree. And I will do that. I will do that as long as I can. But I know at some point that will stop. So another thing I discovered during this time was Nature Conservancy runs a green burial in Tennessee. And when you die, there is no embalming, no lead-lined casket. You are simply wrapped in a cloth and put in the ground. And the plan is you will become a tree. I love that. I think I'll be a maple. I love maple trees, especially red maples in the fall. I wonder if you have something like that in your state, town, country. Green burial. It's going to happen for all of us. We can all give back. We can all be a tree. What else can you do? I hope you realize you need to go outside just for a few minutes every day. You can even have, like Steve Jobs, have a walking meeting. Have 2 or 3 people go with you and go outside and talk about those problems. Pictures are good. They're not as good as a real window, of course, but pictures are all right. Real plants inside have been shown to be beneficial. Just spending time in front of a window, just taking a break, look out at the trees, look out at the green, look out at the blue. All of those are small things. They'll help you be better. This is a project called Orca. Doesn't it look impressive? It's in Iceland. Oh my gosh. It's enormously expensive. It's supposed to be very powerful. It does something interesting. It's supposed to save us from climate change. It's going to take carbon dioxide out of the air and help us. There are some people who are not super fans of it because they say it costs too much, and it doesn't really do as much as it claims. When I read about that, I thought, wait a minute, don't we already have some things that take carbon dioxide from the air, store it in the soil, share it with fungi? Yeah, we do. It's called a tree. Wouldn't it be better if we just did a better job of taking care of the trees? I wonder. Well, it's all about connection, isn't it? It's all about relationships. The trees are connected. We're connected. What we forgot is we're connected to the trees, and the trees are connected to us. We depend on each other. If you'd like to get involved in Suzanne Simard's research, go out and look at this project. It's not just about the trees, it's about all of us and how we need to do a better job of being resilient, which is another word for agile. Thanks for your time today. I know you spend so much time online. I can't imagine why you would spend an hour with me, but the fact that you did makes me very happy. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and maybe we can see if there's any time for questions.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'm sure there will be questions, although I'm tempted to tell everybody just to go outside.
That would be better. Yeah.
All right. So a lot of people saying that they're excited to hear from you.
Thanks.
Someone posted a link about 4 reasons you need the color green.
Okay.
And I'll also link to forest bathing. Have you heard of that
Yes.
concept?
Yes. Yes, I have. And they're especially in South Korea. They make a big deal about forest bathing. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely a good thing. You know, there's a lot of research about color, and we know that the colors have an impact on how we think and how we decide and how we make decisions. So go for earth tones, colors like blue, green, sort of brown, light brown. Those colors do a better job of helping us do a better job of whatever it is that you're trying to do, rather than well, there are other colors that don't work so well. So yeah, there's a lot of research on colors.
All right. So a lot of clapping and thank yous. Thank you for being one of our mother trees, Linda.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for this reminder and your wonderful talk, Linda.
Thanks. Thank you.
I think everyone agreed with what you're saying. I think it's important. We were talking before the session. It's important to be reminded of these things, even if they seem obvious, and keep them in mind.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we are just about at time. I'm not seeing any questions. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with, Linda, before?
Just a reminder, because what we know is that you'll go to sleep on it, and tomorrow you'll wake up and you'll say, "Oh, I wish I had asked this question. I thought of something while I was asleep," and that happens all the time. Send me some email if you have a question that occurs to you tomorrow or the next day. So I'd love to talk about trees and being agile.
Sounds great. Well, I can't thank you enough, Linda. And for everyone that was in attendance, thank you for attending this session and the rest of day 1 at ETE. I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully after at least one walk. And thanks again, everybody. And take care, Linda. Until the next time.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.